Okay, we seem to be live. Excuse me. It's kind of funny. The other day I did a stream about video. Just call everything a video about polo shirts, and then a couple days later, Gentleman's Gazette does a video about polo shirts. But I have like 10 brands of polo shirts that he doesn't even talk about in his video. So someday, hopefully, I'll be able to give a proper, value guide chart-ish thing, like more similar to what he did, than just a show and tell. But this video, and I'm filming it at like the wrong time of day because the sun is totally baking the window. This is a show and tell video, and if you're not new to this channel, then you've seen most of these shirts before in some video. If you're new, then great, welcome. Tell a friend. Every year I do around the holidays when the weather finally starts to cool off, a bit about flannel shirts and, trying to compete with the Karl Morawskis of the internet world and that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm distracted by my hats on the thing. It's just going to drive me nuts seeing this that I never noticed before. See if that helps. Yeah. Okay. A little less clutter. Okay. It's literally just a couple of hats, but if you were wondering what that was. So one second. So I had talked about before, just grab my props, flannel shirts. So for those of you who don't know, brushed cotton, twill, usually too warm for summer, even if they're thin and kind of flimsy, because they tend to have a little bit of a thicker, denser weave, and the brushedness doesn't necessarily make them warmer per se. I mean, this one's been washed enough times that it's gone past whatever furry stage it might have entered, and kind of in the thin, flimsy category now by default. But I'll be wearing and of course pajamas being probably the most common thing you're going to see. Also in flannel, often for the cooler seasons and not really what you want to wear, in summer. But I had, like I said, a lot of times people will see me in a regular sport shirt like this and they'll call it a flannel shirt, and this is way too thin and lightweight to be considered flannel, even though it's still a twill probably, or some similar weave that's not, too far off. But canvas being, a bit more rigid and a simpler weave. And I have one canvas here that I've shown many, many times, which of course is the LL Bean one. Most of these come in solid colors, but occasionally they'll, twist it, or however you want to, but also different from, is this one? I don't think this one's a chambray. This is just a slightly different twill sport shirt, but chambray, of course, the one I was wearing with the red, white, and blue in recent videos, being more of a chambray. Most of what I have here would not be chambray. Oh, poplin. That's the other. Poplin, another popular twill weave, basically. And then, of course, different fabrics, because, of course, we can have linen. But this is, a mini check or a crosshatch or whatever you want to call it. Not necessarily considered a plaid or a true plaid, but definitely a summer fabric, an open, breezy fabric similar to this cotton one, just a different fiber. And, of course, I have other linen ones that I've shown before. This being closer to the chambray or the OCBD, but Oxford cloth button down, but this being a linen, and not obviously a plaid, so technically a solid. But so yeah, a lot of times men, not just women, will identify the thing or try to see it as other than or less than, like this is, more refined than, this, because this is more of a work shirt and this is more of an office casual shirt or a college prep shirt or whatever. So that, delineation between white collar and blue collar starting to become coded in, fabrics and meanings and that sort of thing. But obviously plaid still being celebrated often by some more collegiate or, business forward, weekender garments, but still approved by the intelligentsia or whatever. Of course, the movie I like to reference a lot is A River Runs Through It. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Where, of course, they're not wearing, more of, Western style cowboy clothing per se, with the yokes and the snaps. But I went on Wikipedia because a couple weeks ago I had this original thought, and I've been talking about this in a couple recent videos, how I wanted to kind of, and also partly there was this quote, this Kerouac quote that I had read right around the same time. It was a total coincidence, where he's defending Hemingway in one of his rants, I guess. God, how right Hemingway was when he said there was no remedy for life. And to think that negative little paper shuffling prissies should write condescending obituaries about a man who told the truth, nay, who drew breath in pain to tell a tale like that, in Desolation Angels. He says this. In Hemingway, I had said at the time in one of the episodes about, Hemingway being a less refined writer than, some of the other ones, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and whom were more of his contemporaries than Kerouac, obviously. But Kerouac not quite following exactly in the same footsteps as Hemingway. I mean, he likes Hemingway. He refers to him in a couple of the books and that kind of thing. And there's quotes and bits. I think Dharma Bums, where they talk about the putting the beer in the river or whatever to cool down and all that. But Kerouac coming a little more on the heels of Steinbeck. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're not going to go into all that. But again, Bukowski, I think some people also get credit for this, but I think it was Bukowski who famously said Kerouac only got famous because he dressed like a lumberjack, not because he was a good writer, or something along those lines. And I would still argue any day of the week that Kerouac was a much better writer than Bukowski in terms of theme and scope and poetic language and anything else you want to. Anyway, sorry, a little aside here, getting a little philosophical, but again, intelligentsia versus, and Bukowski is not intelligentsia at all. He's like the exact opposite. He's the, the boorish ruffian made good on. He's more in the tradition of Henry Guards, also blah blah blah, the whole Bohemian thing, blah blah blah. Okay, but so I had questioned, were there, to myself, were there any plaid shirts really even popular much before the 1940s? And Wikipedia agrees with me that no, that wasn't really a thing. So in The River Runs Through It, they are shown wearing the wool plaid shirts, though. And so I had questioned the authenticity of some of the costume design in that shirt, not in terms of historically accurate, but what those particular men might have been wearing. Don't know if he goes into that in the book, because I haven't read the book. I'll get around to it one of these years. But yeah, I was saying, I know I own too many, but I just can't imagine what life without, and trying to get rid of them all, not anytime soon. But that took place in the again, also starts in the 1920s. So again, before the Kerouac era, but the guy writes his book well after. I don't know if Kerouac is already deceased at that point, but he did die young, so there's that. But in the Wikipedia, I found 3 little articles. One was not even really an article; it was kind of a blurb. But someone had put that Pendleton had introduced buffalo plaid check, which I didn't bring any actual, but this is kind of the same idea. Two-tone, your famous lumberjack Paul Bunyan red and black check. Yeah, but they said that Pendleton introduced this in 1850, but then on the Pendleton site, they weren't even in Oregon until 1863. The company isn't like really founded until 1909, and then they start their wool mill in 1912 or something. So yeah, I think they were confusing Pendleton with Woolrich. Woolrich has been around since 1830. Don't know if they were the actual first who introduced it or they just copied it off someone else. The Filson-Mackinac thing was referenced in the longer article that I didn't read the whole thing, but they didn't come around until 1897. Paul Bunyan, the character, might have been around sooner, but really comes into the full public focus in 1916, somewhere around there. So he's introduced well after these wool plaid shirts may have already existed for almost a century, literally, supposedly. Well, at least half a century. 1850 to 1916 is a pretty good long stretch. So again, I don't know that 1850 date is at all accurate. But Woolrich does predate the gold rush. So, and again, even the Pendleton family being in America, apparently, by 20 or 30 years. But so again, the wool being the predecessor of the cotton flannel. Again, your bed sheets and your canvas shirts and all that kind of thing that weren't really the staples yet that they become. Wool being, the hardy fiber, the thing that can, but obviously cotton shirts become popular at some point. And they are, in the film, the family is Scottish, so there's kind of a nod to tartan. So again, I don't know how accurate it is that he would be wearing a black watch plaid shirt. I don't know if that particular tartan would have been around yet in popular clothing as much as kilts and whatnot, but they want to, in the film they want to make a nod to their Scottish ancestry, so that was an obvious easy choice to have him wearing that shirt. Again, whether or not he actually would have had this pattern in a shirt, I don't know. You can go back through the archives and maybe find examples of that shirt. Doesn't mean he bought them, but in the book, again, maybe he says, no, I always wore the black watch because I was Scottish. Like, I don't know. But again, the mountain man thing being slightly different than the cowboy thing, and a lot of the cowboy thing coming more out of Hollywood, again, in the 40s and 50s, than necessarily what cowboys actually wore. It gets, there's all this gray area and overlap. And of course, the Beach Boys wearing the famous Pendleton's connection. I didn't bring in the wool shirts because, again, it's summer. We're not getting into all that. I talk about that. Catch me in 5 months, 4 or 5 months, and we'll get into it. So most of the sport shirts that we're talking about that come out in the 40s through the 60s and then get the resurgence with the Ralph Lauren polo and all that blah blah in the 80s, mostly in Madras or Madras or however you want to pronounce it, that kind of thing, yada yada yada. So, we want to talk a little bit more about styling and this kind of thing than just history. But I want to talk about history a little bit because, again, this was on my mind. So, wool flannel and and even cotton flannel, the heavier cotton flannel, not all the same as sport shirts in regular twills and other weaves. And again, the main weave, apart from that, well, again, poplin being one of the popular ones. Pop, pop, pop. Seersucker, which of course I've shown many, many times, which is also not grunge at all, the kind of the opposite of grunge. But the article skipped all of the 1950s and the Beach Boys and Creedence Clearwater. So again, two different, both technically counterculture bands in a sense, with totally different styles for a while there. And of course, Western wear, they did reference Daisy Duke, who came out later, well after, well, kind of around the same time as Urban Cowboy. I don't remember if John Travolta really wears all of plaid in that movie, but definitely after the whole, again, two different, you had like kind of two different 1960s is going on, right? You had the, you know, like in The Outsiders, they don't really show them wearing a lot of, they do show the Pony Boy and them wearing a little bit of flannel plaid, but, or, you know, again, the more subdued colors, the more working class vibe versus, you know, Mustangs and bright colors and, you know, what kind of hat goes better with this. And then of course I do have, hang on, so I can see what I'm actually showing for a second. We do have the more traditional one that I got also could go with this hat pretty good. But I haven't really worn this shirt because it's actually a lot heavier and thicker, and actually a little bit too warm for summer, better for autumn. Whereas this shirt's a bit lighter weight and less expensive and, you know, lower quality. Yeah. But again, still a form of plaid. In fact, just a quilt, basically a patchwork of different plaid, you know, bonded together and has like a fun vibe. Of course, you could also wear, you know, a little bit more of a almost fedora hat than the pork pie or the trilby, that kind of thing. But you have your 60s vacation land kind of look built in, but also the seersucker. Again, I have this one, I haven't even worn yet, but you know, another inexpensive one from a less expensive company, but with the button-up collar as opposed to, again, the camp collar. Sorry, the tag is still over this. Another shirt that I won't wear until like next month sometime. But this one being, again, more of a almost canvas weave, not the same as a seersucker with the puckered texture and all that kind of thing. So still breathable, still airy, but not as, you know, middle of summer thing. I can show it a little better here. I have this one out of the bag, of course. You know, again, a very light, this one again being a half linen blend and a cotton blend. But the Western stuff, again, being typically more poplin, some, again, more refined than others, because you have, like, this one doesn't have yokes, but it does have snap pocket flaps. It doesn't have as light of a airy texture as this one. It's a little closer to just a standard poplin. So you can even get Western shirts that are kind of more poplin. In fact, it's getting harder to find good Western shirts that aren't even just poly blend stuff, because this one, again, is a poly blend, but it's made to look vintage. But of course, with a very hee-haw, more retro, more in-your-face tartan plaid with more garish colors. Garish being more redneck or oaky or whatever. So, you know, are you deliberately veering toward that or away from it? Again. And same with neckwear. A refined, you know, gentleman might still wear a tartan plaid necktie or even a regular plaid. I brought in these. And you could get away with that. And of course, anybody wearing a bow tie is typically these days not seen as, you know, so much rustic necessarily. But of course, it depends on the occasion, where you're wearing it, how you're wearing it, yada, yada, yada. But of course, accessories not being the same as, you know, your primary. So again, shirts, this being another Western one with the yokes, but a polyester blend thing. So less comfortable than this one in hot weather. And of course, if you have a couple more long sleeve versions, this one being a super lightweight one, the kind of thing that good luck finding it. But again, with the really contrasting colors, because it has that pop of blue against that more urban, or I'm sorry, less urban barn door looking brown. I think this one's 100%, yeah, 100% cotton. This is a Wrangler one from many years ago, though. What Wrangler has done lately similar to this, I don't know. I haven't noticed a lot that was as appealing. I found some Wrangler shirts that are the chambray ones that are still the same. I'm not sure what else that they offer that's similar, where this was a different brand, the Cattleman. Oh, more subdued, but similar, almost the exact same shirt, also long sleeve. So I can get away with wearing this a little bit in the summer if I don't want to get, you know, a sunburn, or if I'm going out in the evening more. I can still rock the long sleeve in a couple of shirts, but finding, again, similar to this in a long sleeve shirt has not gotten easier as far as I can tell. Whereas, of course, speaking of Woolrich, they were still offering some kind of rustic things. But I've had this one for a while, but it's a nice lightweight, mountainy kind of vibe. Again, with the contrasty colors like that, again, kind of came around the same time as the surf shirt clothing was kind of starting to look like that too, where you know, having orange and a blue meant to be kind of in brown, yellow, and always that one weird color kind of thrown in to make it left of center, you know. But then automatically screaming casual clothing, not even office casual friendly, you know, most of the time. So yeah, so something like this, not even a tuckable shirt, going to have a square bottom hem. Well, this one might be tucked. Yeah, the other one was. This one's, yeah, more or less meant to be tucked. I'm thinking of the other shirt. But typically, again, if you have the camp collar as opposed to the button collar, you're going to have the squared hem. I grabbed the wrong one, but that's okay. You get the gist. Most of the people who are going to wear something like that are going to wear it untucked anyway, which looks bad, which is why Untuck It, the brand, came along, which I think their shirts all run small and a little overpriced. Typically, if you're going to do something like that, you should get it hemmed and just go spend the $20 or whatever and have it modified if you're not going to tuck it in. But most of the Western shirts are not going to have a squared off bottom hem, whereas I'm sure this one does. Because again, camp shirt collar, and won't usually be any button down aspect of those. Whereas some of the ones will have that. This one, yeah. There you go, button down collar. Whereas a lot of these also, the collar will be too thin and flimsy to wear with any real necktie, but you might be able to wear a bow tie with it if they're not too clashing or whatever, but most of the time not meant to be worn with a tie at all, even though it has the button-up feature, which, again, is a weird, like, why? You know, but a lot of people don't like the look of the camp collars, as I had posted that Iron Snail comment where the guy said, where is it? He was talking, was it the guy talking about Hawaiian shirt? No, I think it was a different guy. Oh, I don't understand why everyone under 35 pronounces buttons as buttons. That's a different one. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see it here, but I don't want to read too much of it. But anyway, oh, here it is. Reveal camp collars are ugly AF. So yeah, some people don't like them. But so anyway, so the video, or sorry, the wiki article talked about the Mackinac Cruiser and Aloha shirts. Not any real specific sports shirts article that surprised me. Camp shirts, yes, but no pictures in that article, which again I thought was odd. And then of course prompting me to again have to look up when Woolrich and Filson existed, which again 1830, 1897, and Pendleton being later than both of them. So although Pendleton is the one that gets most of my business these days, even though a lot of their product is no longer made in the States, I think much of it comes from China now. So they celebrate being a great American mill, but they don't necessarily mill all that much of their fabric, maybe the blankets more than the shirts. Okay, so I guess that ends the history lesson part. We're at about a half an hour, and a couple of you keep popping in and popping out. Well, if you're coming in now, you're really getting the show and tell portion, because I just finished up the history portion, so you can go back and watch the beginning. Oh, they left. Okay, well, that's fine. Goodbye. Anyway, so again, another poplin shirt. This one in a little bean. Stuff like this is nice because you can wear it with blue pants or khaki pants or stone pants. And that was a thing that I had talked about in one of my previous photos way back when, is I had an Orvis shirt that I really liked. It had a lot of pink in it, but it also had blue, green, and khaki. So you could wear it with pretty much any color pants. This is similar, but with, you know, more of a stone base than a pink base. But this one I wouldn't wear with blue pants, on the other hand, because it has no real blue in it. And I wouldn't wear it with black pants either, because black pants would just be dark for summer. Whereas stuff like this is a little more common in summer, more of a two colors than multicolors. Obviously, most of what I'm going to be showing is more multicolors, and of course the patriotic thing, this one being almost the exact same as what I'm wearing, except slightly more nautical than Western. Just a tiny bit, because again, it doesn't have yokes and it doesn't have flap button pockets. Hello and goodbye, whoever you were. Okay. Then, of course, when we get into, well, we can get into, this one's long sleeve also, but more patriotic with the darker, more bolder colors, as opposed to the muted colors or the pastel-y colors. This was another Orvis, lightweight, again, slightly better in the evening kind of shirt. This one, on the other hand, more of a really bright, yuppie, preppy, fun, boaty, early summer kind of look more, but the fabric a little heavier for the hotter weather, as opposed to like a more seersucker texture again. So this one may be a little better for the later months that we're coming into. Although I like that yellow summer vibe sometimes. And of course, save that. And of course, the more mountain man stuff that I'll talk about in a bit. Similar to plaid, but not exactly plaid. Of course, we can have window panes and a variety of different types. This one happens to be linen, so it has that less structured, more office casual than, you know, business formal appeal. This one that I show a lot, save that. So again, the boaty thing, slightly different than the mountain thing, if you want to make a real distinction, because this one with the camp collar, a bit more almost mountainy for colors, but very summer campy, but still could be boaty. Whereas something like this, very boaty, also with the button down again, but still camp friendly, even though it's not a camp collar. And I've shown this one before recently too. Another seersucker, more seersucker, and more bright colors. Obviously very pastel. If you switched the purple for, you know, red or something, it'd be more patriotic and more true, you know, preppy, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, something like this and a check that I consider more autumny than maybe summery. Kind of right on the verge, but also not a camp collar, but not a button down. Just a nice late summer shirt. But not a madras, but similar, you know, principle, if not quite theme. Okay. Then, of course, what I was complaining about earlier, we'll get to those in a minute. Okay, so we got, what, 2 stacks left, short stacks. So like I said, in terms of like mountainy colors, I have these. One's a little darker, a little more mountain. This one could be a little more coastal. Not quite coastal grandma, but on the verge. Getting there slightly. Pardon me while but this one, again, not a seersucker, just a light twill, whereas this one's just a little more of a chambray fabric. If I look at it closely, I think it's less of a twill and more of a chambray, being the big difference. So same with these. These are both, what, JCPenney ones that I've had for years. So this one goes obviously great with khaki pants. This one goes obviously great with khaki pants or shorts. Both of these meant to be tucked in. This one without the button collar, this one with. But again, the kind of thing where, like I said, if you were going to wear it untucked, you should just get it hemmed. But kind of confused if you're not wearing it. You could wear these office casual, but you wouldn't have to. You could still wear them as regular sport shirts. But if you were going to wear them office casual, you probably still wouldn't wear a tie, even though for some reason it has a full button, like, you know. So the kind of shirts that would be less confusing if they all just came with camp collars, but they don't. And then the last, these last two, before we go more strictly into just mountain hiking kind of vibe, like this being, you know, not red, white, and blue. Instead, it's like salmon, white, and blue, right? But it's not really blue. It's almost a teal. It's not quite sky blue. It's not quite teal. So it flips the Patriot image, just tilts it a little bit, but still gives the same, you know, faded, you know, flag vibe. Very preppy, very boaty. This one being long sleeve and also linen. And this one, again, being almost buffalo check. This one, just a really nice shirt. Again, long sleeve, so a little bit warm for summer days. And not as light. I don't think this one's, I forget if it's 100% linen or if it's a blend. Open it up. Where's the thing? Yeah, it's about 48% cotton, 52% linen, and also made in China. So there you go. So not a full linen shirt. So it has a little bit more structure, definitely a better office casual option than some of the others, but still technically a sport shirt. And okay, I'm just sweating a bit. Like I said, it's the wrong time of the day. We're going to really start pushing it, but we only got a few more shirts left to go. So when we talked about, again, I have stuff that it's kind of like, what if Indiana Jones wore plaid? He would wear something more like this or this, maybe. So it's almost his colors, but it's a little more mountain man friendly. This one also a little bit desert friendly. This one slightly less. But again, just a nice cotton poplin, not a flannel, lighter than a flannel, definitely can wear in summer a bit, especially in the mountains where it's cooler or whatever. This one, a little bit more of an open weave, although it doesn't look like it, but not quite as nice as like that linen blend one or something. It's still a little heavier, and the texture is a little coarser, so sometimes I might want to wear a t-shirt underneath of it, that kind of thing. But a nice subdued pattern, not too bold. Technically not a true plaid, more, you know, a little left of true plaid, but yeah, we'll allow it, you know, because it's a grid concept. It's plaid adjacent, right? Whereas, of course, this one looking, you know, very Western without having the yokes and having button pockets. But look, we've done the pockets on the bias, so there's a diagonal contrast. So very sharp contrast, very not office casual, very bold. Again, mountain man or almost cowboy. The coloration being definitely, you know, not really nautical, but nautical adjacent in, you know, terms of blue and yellow can work for nautical, but more of a pronounced summer camp mountain lumberjack theme look, which of course is slightly different than the true farmer look, whatever that means, which, you know. Again, you know, maybe more like our old standby. But again, this being a rare design for LL Bean, but again, with the flap pockets, again, no snaps, we have buttons, but again, not flannel. And then, of course, the one I've shown a billion times, this lightweight one that can be nautical, but I consider more mountainy. Again, it does have the flap pockets, but with the buttons and no yokes and no button-down collar, a very flimsy collar, really. Not typical, but this is a JCPenney shirt. So, you know, we're not getting the most durable thing. We're just getting a nice lightweight fabric. And that brings us finally to the nylon stuff, which I do use for summer hiking sometimes. Not always. They were meant to be more breathable than they really are. They're kind of sweaty, but they're not horrible. If I think it's going to maybe rain and I want a quick dry option, they're definitely, you know, good for that. So again, I have the one that could be borderline nautical, but they have the little mesh bit to supposedly pull moisture away. I don't know if that does any good or not. I don't live in a humid climate. I know it's a little bit humid today, but I'm indoors, so hopefully I won't be sweating too bad. And then it only has a single zip pocket, but LL Bean introduced these a few years ago, and I got like 3 or 4 of them already. And so I wear them a bit. I wear this one probably the most, and it doesn't show a ton of like wear considering. So they hold up okay to day hike use. I don't know how well they do against other brands if you were going backpacking and that sort of thing. It does have a locker loop. It does have a bit of contrast bias. But obviously a bold, not office-friendly plaid. You know? And if you have the kind of, you know, girlfriend who's always trying to refine your closet and telling you what she doesn't like, or won't go out with a guy who wears plaid shirts or whatever, she might be a hypergamist, and that might be a red flag, and she might be, you know, always looking to trade up and find somebody better or whatever. I don't know. But here's obviously a green and blue kind of on the Black Watch principle, but with a twist. And so obviously a very more rustic and less urban-y, you know, than even the last two I just showed. You know, these, like, again, these being the kind of thing you could wear pretty, you know, regularly sport shirty look in any city, whereas this might be pushing it. This, you know, might be a little too country or north woodsy or whatever for the cocktail hour crowd. I don't know. But again, just a different type of fabric for a different type of function altogether. and, you know, going with the roots. And it also has the sleeve tabs for when you want to roll up your sleeve that obviously don't come on standard sport shirts apart from safari shirts very often. Sorry, a little bit sweaty, but not too terrible. Anywho, so that's just a sampling of Plaid. For those of you who aren't familiar with Plaid, because every few months, like I said, I need to put out a Plaid video or a, but I haven't, you know, there's no kind of real way to do, you know, necessarily this one's the best bang for your buck kind of thing, because they're all kind of in a similar price range, typically from the companies that I buy. And if something is kind of light and flimsy, I don't necessarily expect it to last as long, but if I only need it for those few warm months, but I also tend to not wear them, you know, for a bunch of months, so they last anyway, because if I only wear it, you know, half a dozen times and then put it away, I'll still have it for next year. Like this shirt, I thought would have disintegrated by now because I've actually worn it a fair amount and it's still doing pretty well, even though I've started to baby it more. I'm less inclined to baby it this year, as I said, last month or whatever. And in the summer reset video, I think it was, which was episode, while we're at it, when was that episode? It was pretty recent. 355. So if you go back and watch episode 355 or 358 about the polo shirt, you can look into that. And of course, ones like these that I keep meaning to take them out of the bags and wear them, but since I already have other similar things, this one's been around for a while. This one's been a champ. So I keep meaning to wear this one instead, so that this one can last a few more years. But you know, whatever. On the other hand, I always keep telling myself, well, if this one gets a hole or something, I already still have this one. So we'll see. And then, of course, again, the linen. I think the linen is a little more durable than the cotton overall, but I think it also depends on the quality from which brand, blah, blah, blah. So is Orvis linen better than an LL Bean linen, and by how much? Again, I don't know how you'd exactly quantify that, but obviously I've worn the Orvis ones more than the Bean ones, and they've done pretty well, but they do wrinkle and, you know, bunch up and all that kind of thing. And that, of course, being a check, which is not technically a plaid, whatever, you know. But it kind of is. Micro check. Anyway, so as always, yeah, I'm going to wrap it up. If you want to buy me a pizza or a linen shirt or something, you can check out that app. I activated that a bit. And then also I didn't do a boycott Tinder video in a while. I guess I'm doing this one instead now, obviously. But definitely, apparently Bumble is up for sale and nobody wants it. So an industry that is cratering, but not fast enough. It's the slow moving train wreck that needs to accelerate and collapse and do the world a favor. Okay. If you have any questions, of course, as always, put them in the comments, where I didn't do the live chat for this because it's already longer than I meant it to be. So, but I will be happy to try and, you know, answer something with a decent response.